When a little girl's body was found in a lake tied to a rock to weigh her down, locals knew an evil killer was on the loose. It was the 15th of February in Livingston, Texas. 11-year-old Audrey Cunningham never showed up for school, so the police were called. The local community was extremely concerned for the girl's whereabouts. Audrey had apparently left for school around 7 a.m. that day, so it made no sense as to why she never showed up. That's when people started to get questioned, and a neighbor told police something really concerning. She said she always usually saw the little girl on her walk to the bus, however she didn't that morning. Audrey was believed to have been wearing a Hello Kitty backpack at the time of her disappearance, which made the next discovery a harrowing one. 2 days after vanishing, her backpack was discovered near Lake Livingston Dam. Tragically, on the 20th of February, the girl's body was discovered. Horrifically, divers knew this was no accident. The little girl's body had been tied to a rock to weigh it down. It was clear an evil murderer had been responsible. An autopsy was completed and it determined that her cause of death was homicidal violence, including blunt head trauma. Meanwhile, on the 16th of February, a local man had been arrested. This was just a day after the girl had vanished, and the man was named Don McDougall. Now, this was actually for an unrelated stabbing in the area. Interestingly, the 42-year-old was friends with Audrey's dad. He'd been living on a trailer on their property. Police started looking into him further and found out that he had a dark blue car. This was similar to the one believed to have been involved in the disappearance of the little girl. Investigators did some digging into the vehicle and found rope inside that was consistent with the rope used on the child. Don had also reportedly taken his car to a garage the day after Audrey vanished, and he was reportedly filthy and acting suspicious. Investigators examined his phone and placed him at 3 key areas during the murder. He was reportedly found to have been lying to police about his whereabouts. He posted on social media stating, "I was there and I was questioned. I am not running or hiding. I have done everything I can to help find her. I've done nothing wrong. I'm the one that went and knocked on the houses by the bus stop to get video footage." Don has a criminal record, including convictions for enticing a child. He previously assaulted a 10-year-old girl after a family party in 2007. He reportedly got into bed with her, tried to her, but she managed to jump and run away. He only spent 2 years in prison for this. Audrey's family are understandably devastated. It's reported that a legal loophole meant that he didn't actually have to register on the S offenders list. The family stated if they had known about this, they would never have let him live on their property. The investigation is ongoing.
My take on deja vu is like, oh, it's not something you already been through. It's just like maybe your higher self or whatever it is, some sort of energy is telling you, yo, this point in time right now could change your life. Either go this way or that way. But in this point right now, you literally have control of your life. And like it happened to me, bro.
Oh, like what specifically did it happen?
So basically, like I was at a park and me and my girlfriend had broken up. And I saw her, I stood still, and I got deja vu. It felt like not that I've been here before,
but it just felt weird.
It felt weird, bro. Either I could keep walking or go back. In my head, I was literally like, you know what? I'm just gonna take the risk. If I would have kept walking, Julia would have never existed. Yeah. But since I went back, I have a daughter.
Today, we're diving into the intriguing story of Paul Berggren, a controversial figure in the legal world. Born in 1957 in New Jersey, Berggren started his career as a prosecutor. He quickly gained a reputation for his courtroom skills and taking on high-profile cases. He transitioned to defense work representing clients in criminal cases, including mobsters and notorious criminals. Berggren became known for his aggressive strategies and ability to challenge the prosecution effectively. However, his career took a dramatic turn. In 2010, Berggren was arrested and later convicted on charges related to racketeering and conspiracy. The prosecution claimed he was involved in criminal activities including witness tampering. Despite his fall from grace, Berggren's story raises questions about ethics and law and the thin line between defense and complicity. If you want to learn more about Paul Berggren, then you have to check out Criminal Attorney. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Dive into the crime-filled life of one of the most famous attorneys ever.
One Direction star Liam Payne died today, but the details behind this are somewhat troubling. So if you don't know Liam, he was a member of One Direction, one of the biggest musical groups of the last few decades, and I remember being young and kind of growing up with One Direction. But just an hour or so ago, it was reported that Liam Payne had fallen to his death from a third-story hotel balcony. This is the actual exterior of the hotel here. Now, according to some reports that are emerging, right before Liam died, he had smashed his laptop to pieces. Witnesses said he was acting really erratically. and reports are even claiming that he had to be carried back to his hotel room. Now, it's obviously unknown right now if this was intentional or accidental. You see, just yesterday some damning reports were published. Model Maya Henry, aka Liam's ex-fiancée, was accusing him publicly of obsessive contact, and she announced that she was seeking legal action. In addition, in the last week or so, there have been a lot of allegations made online against Liam, with some users on platforms like X claiming that he was messaging minors. So this really begs the immediate question, was this accidental or was this on purpose? I don't know, but this is really shocking news. I was just on a tour here at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, and people were literally checking their phones and gasping out loud, and my wife called me. I mean, that's just crazy.
A woman in Xi'an, China was found dead in 2016 after being trapped inside of her apartment's elevator for an entire month. The woman, only identified as Miss Wu, was found after elevator maintenance returned to work on March 1st following a month-long break for the Chinese New Year. 2 maintenance men turned the elevator's power off on January 30th after it malfunctioned. They reportedly asked if anyone was inside and heard no response, but they failed to follow proper rules, which would have been to pry open the doors and double-check if anyone was inside. Once the cab was thought to be empty, it was returned to the apartment building's first floor. When Miss Wu was found, her hands were visibly mangled, likely from trying to get out. She also had one hand pressed against the door. It's believed Miss Wu died from starvation and fatal dehydration while being trapped in the elevator for the entire month. She was in her 40s and lived alone on the 15th floor. She reportedly kept to herself. Her relatives did come looking for her a couple of weeks prior to the horrific discovery and even reported her missing, but it was never connected to the elevator shutoff. At this point, it's unclear how nobody heard her screams for help. Residents in Miss Wu's building often complained about broken lights, water and power cutoffs, and constant elevator breakdowns. They even stated that management routinely ignored their complaints. Miss Wu's death and the negligence of the elevator company and the building's management office sparked outrage. Hundreds of residents in the Jialing district gathered at the apartment building to protest their anger about how something as simple as riding in an elevator in your own apartment can somehow turn deadly. A few people from the elevator repair company and the maintenance firm in charge of the faulty elevator were detained, but I'm unsure if any charges were ever brought.
This woman created some of the worst videos on the internet. This is Ashley Richards from Houston, Texas. In 2015, she pleaded guilty to 4 counts of producing and 1 count of distributing these disturbing videos I'm about to explain to you. This all started in 2012 when the group PETA, or the group known as the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, contacted the Houston police about a video they had found online. This film was titled Ebony Kill Cat, and it depicted extremely sadistic and cruel acts being forced upon a kitten. So the police got in contact with the people from PETA, and they then sent them an additional 20 videos. These videos depicted the sadistic torture of various animals, including kittens, a fish, pigeons, crayfish, mice, and a rabbit, all being tortured with different things like high heels, knives, screwdrivers, and also pliers. In the videos, the woman that appeared in them was wearing a Mardi Gras style mask, and she would talk suggestively to the people watching this torture, meaning that there were people actually out there paying to watch this sadistic stuff happening, and also paying the woman to produce these horrific videos. And the worst part about these videos is that she would urinate and slowly torture and chop up live dogs, cats, rabbits, and mice. Absolutely inhumane stuff. Eventually, the police would track Ashley's IP address, which led them to her suburban home in Houston. This then led them to Brent Justice, who were the 2 people producing these horrible videos and selling them on a website online. And Congress had recently passed a bill making this specific type of video material, otherwise known as Crush P, illegal, so thankfully these 2 were arrested. But Brent Justice, after the trial, was actually sentenced to 50 years in prison. However, Ashley, the woman who actually carried out these acts on camera, was only sentenced to 10 years in prison, which is just insane. This case is absolutely sickening, and both of these people definitely deserve life sentences. I'm usually good with true crime cases and disturbing stuff, but when it comes to animal cruelty, it just hits different and more shocking, honestly. This is just crazy, and I can't believe people actually do this.
Saw this one video of like, you obviously know Cole Sprouse and Dylan Sprouse.
Yeah, they're like blonde.
Yeah, you gotta know, yeah.
They had 2 shows. One was
Yeah.
called Sweet Life with Zach and Cody, and the other one was called Sweet Life on Deck. And the Sweet Life on Deck was the one when like they went on the boat. As they were getting older, they were gonna get ready to go to college, but they both didn't want to end the show off like that because they wanted to do one more season just to make it fair, just so like everybody doesn't lose their jobs just because they want to go to college in real life. So they wrote a script on a new season, and Disney shut it down completely. Like, a week later, Disney called them back up like, we won't do your idea, we'll show you our idea, and like you tell us like what you guys think. And it was basically their idea just mixed around with like different shit added to it.
Bruh.
Both of them laughed and they left. They was like, nah. They obviously ended up going to college, lived like a normal life for a bit.
Shit, I didn't even know that.
Did you know Gordon Ramsay survived a terrifying murder attempt? Gordon Ramsay is a British celebrity chef, well known for TV shows such as Hell's Kitchen and Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. He's been given a total of 17 Michelin stars. He's arguably one of the most influential chefs in the world. However, his life was nearly taken in a shocking incident in Costa Rica in 2011. Gordon had been filming for a Channel 4 show called Shark Bait. The show was about the fishing industry, and Gordon and his team were trying to shed light on the cruel practice of shark hunting. Smugglers would cut sharks' fins off and leave them to die, and needless to say, Gordon was really against this. In a terrifying ordeal during the filming of the program, Gordon and the crew were confronted by a gang involved in illegal substances. The gang poured a barrel of petrol all over Gordon and his team and threatened their life. They were then held at gunpoint and told that if they didn't stop filming, they would be killed. Local police showed up and advised Gordon and his crew to leave the country.
This man was charged with one of the most disturbing crimes in Texas history. This is David Vincent Atkins Jr., who was arrested in 2016 on a very extremely disturbing charge. All of this started when David's landlord came across some extremely disturbing videos. Apparently, inside of his rental property in Harris County, Texas, the landlord discovered a laptop which contained CP. But when police investigated the CP, they recognized the man that was in the videos. It was David himself. He had actually recorded himself assaulting a 3-month-old child. And like I said before, what's even more disturbing is that he didn't download these images, which is already just terrible. He created them himself. And during David's eventual trial, it was revealed that he had more than one victim. It seems that in his past, David was a very disturbed individual. When he was 14 years old, he actually was sentenced to juvenile detention for sexually assaulting his 5-year-old blood sister. And then when that happened, his other blood sister came forward and said that he had been sexually assaulting her since she was 3 years old. So both of his sisters testified at his trial. And apparently when he was younger, after he was released from juvenile detention, this delinquent behavior continued. And David would seek out single mothers with young children and would volunteer to stay home and watch the kids while the mothers were out at work. So nobody really knows how many victims this guy had in his lifetime. One of the really sad things about cases like this is that, well, specifically in this case, the jury and the people in the court had to actually watch the videos that he recorded of the assault of the young infant. And after he was eventually convicted and sentenced, he apologized to the court for, making them watch these materials. Thankfully, though, this man is now in jail for life with no parole. So once again, to David, I say have fun rotting.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. The video that I'm about to show you is extremely disturbing. This is Kevin Cosgrove's phone call from the 105th floor of the World Trade Center 2. He was trapped on his floor after the World Trade Center got hit by an airplane. You can hear him getting more and more annoyed and frustrated with the dispatcher throughout these few minutes, and it unfortunately ends abruptly when the tower begins to collapse. You hear his last moments of life as he says he's too young to die. This really puts into perspective how scary and terrible 9/11 was. May all the victims rest in peace, and here's the audio clip.
So you can conserve your oxygen, okay? Try to take God to blow you in from the list. It's really bad. It's black. It's iron. Does anybody else want to try it in here? We're young men. We're not ready to die. I'm kidding. I don't need to get my ass down. I need oxygen. They have a lot of apparatus on the He doesn't feel like it, lady. You get him in from all over. Get him in from Jersey. I don't think he's really Ohio. Mine's high school. I must have called about a dozen times already. COSGROVE. Yeah, my wife thinks I'm all right. I called her and said I was leaving the building. I was fine, and bang. Well, I want to go down here. Cherry. Dead Cherry. Dead Cherry's next to me. 105. Whose office? John Astro's office. That's where you go. That's the office. We're in John Astro's office. OST. ARU. ARU. Right. That's the office we're in. There's three of us in here. OST. ARU. Hello? Hello? We're looking at financial center. Three of us, two broken windows. Message number 100.
1978, there was this guy, but his name was John Wayne Gacy. He was basically a killer clown, bro. Like, he would dress up as Pogo the Clown. He was targeting only teen boys, and bro, this guy had 27 bodies in his basement. And the only reason why he got caught is because he couldn't fit no more down there, so he threw it, call me if I'm wrong, either in a river or in the sewer, one of those things. But it popped up, and like, they found the body. They caught onto it because that kid was supposed to see about a job at his house. He lured him by saying, I need somebody to do construction in my house. And supposedly a victim that escaped, he never talked about that. Like, he never talked about like that he was about to get assaulted by him, and like, he was dressed up as Pogo the Clown, and in a squeaky voice he would say, I'm gonna R-word. He inspired Stephen King and shit.
Essex man set up a hidden camera in a couple's home to live stream them dying. It was the 9th of April 2023. Couples Stephen and Carol Baxter were living together in their home in West Mersey, Essex. Stephen was 61 and Carol was 64. The pair actually had a bath mat company. On the day in question, they were found deceased in their home in their armchairs. A post-mortem was conducted and determined that they both died from a fatal dose of F. No one had any idea who had killed the couple until investigators started looking into Carol's will. 34-year-old Luke DeWitt was named in the will as the new director of Carol's company. Then the hideous truth started to unravel. Investigators discovered that Luke had created 20 online catfish profiles in order to trick Carol. Carol had a long-term health condition that made her immune system very vulnerable. Luke had posed online as an American doctor in order to give her incorrect health advice. He was intentionally causing her health to deteriorate. He also posed as a solicitor in order to forge her will. He got to know the couple for over a decade and was their IT consultant. They trusted Luke and let him into their home. Chillingly, he had set up a hidden camera inside their home so that he could watch the pair die. This was after he entered the home and prepared them both a drink. Little did they know he'd poisoned this drink, and he then went home to watch them on the camera pass away. He has been given 37 years in prison.
The death of David Carradine, aka Bill. No one could make contact with him, and they assumed that he was still in his hotel room. Well, when they entered his hotel room, they found David Carradine dead. He had accidentally hanged himself. When authorities entered David Carradine's hotel room, they found him strangled to death with a curtain cord. He was completely naked, and he had been dead for at least 12 hours. Now, at first, it may seem like David actually took his own life, but that's really not what happened. Because, you see, when he was found dead, there was a rope around his neck and a rope tied tightly around his genitals. Apparently, David Carradine had been trying to engage in some sort of autoerotic asphyxiation thing, where you basically choke yourself to the point of almost losing consciousness to get some sort of a thrill. But something had gone wrong in the process. Maybe he set something up improperly, or he took it too far, and he ended up killing himself on accident inside of his hotel room. So obviously it wasn't just shocking that David Carradine died so suddenly, but it was also so bizarre that he died in this way. And I will always remember him as Bill.
Angela Flores was arrested on Mother's Day after confessing to killing her 3 youngest children with the help of her teenage son. Authorities took Angela to the hospital around midnight on Saturday night after she was spotted in her neighbor's yard lighting candles and holding a Bible. She was also reportedly heard screaming, quote, "My family is abusing me," end quote. At around 7:40 the next morning, LAPD went to her West Hills home after a 911 call reporting an assault with a deadly weapon. They then found Angela's 12-year-old daughter and her 10 and 8-year-old sons deceased. How and when the children died have not yet been confirmed. Angela was arrested on 3 counts of murder along with her 16-year-old son, who she claimed also helped her kill the 3 children. Angela reportedly claimed to believe that the children were possessed by demons. About a week prior to the murders, Angela called her ex-husband and made odd comments, talking about God and death. He claimed that she was never really religious before and didn't know what to think about the phone call at the time. Angela is currently being held on a $6 million bail.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
He also led them to a game they should never have played. Only the school bully and timid soul sat in Sarah's cozy living room. United by the mysterious disappearance of their friend Mark, they were desperate for answers. Mark played this before he vanished, Emily said, holding the ritual instructions. Maybe we'll find clues. As they began the incantation, the atmosphere shifted. Outside, the storm brewed, mirroring the rising tension felt in the room. Did you hear that? Tim's voice quivered as the thunder rumbled. Ignoring him, Emily lit the final candle. Power flickered, then died. A cold presence enveloped them, the Midnight Man, Tim whispered, paralyzed with fear. Emily felt a chill. "Mark, is that you?" she dared to ask. A soft whisper floated in the air.
"You called?" Dirty facts about history that school probably didn't teach you. Part 20. Before she married Ronald, Nancy Reagan was known around Hollywood for her oral abilities, therefore making her a certified throat goat. Queen Victoria really loved doing the deed with her husband, Prince Albert. Like, really loved doing it. To the point where it was audible through doors and walls several times daily. After the Founding Fathers signed the Declaration of Independence, they went frat boy mode and racked up a pretty impressive bar tab. A bottle of whiskey, 2 bottles of wine, and 7 to 10 beers per Founding Father. George Washington in particular was known as the 3-bottle man, meaning he could drink 3 entire fifths of whiskey without blacking out. The guy who invented sea monkeys was a white supremacist, so if you ever bought this bullshit, you indirectly contributed to the Klan.
This is the story of serial killer Jason Voorhees. Part 2. Pamela Voorhees was beheaded by Alice Hardy on June 13, 1979. 2 months later, Alice was brutally murdered by Pamela's son, Jason, as he stabbed her in the head with an ice pick. In 1984, Camp Packanack opened its doors just down the road from Camp Crystal Lake. The vengeful Jason went on a killing spree, killing all but 2 of the new camp counselors. Sporting a burlap sack with 1 hole in it to aid his sight, Jason was living in a shack in the woods. Disturbingly, Jason kept his mother's head in a shrine in the shack. Counsellor Ginny barely escaped, but she was on a stretcher, though Counsellor Paul's fate and whereabouts remain unknown to this day. Jason got attacked with a machete, but now having acquired superhuman strength, remained alive and got away. There's even more to this story. Let me know if you'd like a part 3. This is Jason Voorhees. He's one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of not just America, but the world. He attended Camp Crystal Lake, a summer camp. In the summer of 1957, he went with his mother, who was the chef for the camp. One day, when Pamela, his mother, pictured was cooking for the camp, Jason was thrown into the lake by some of the other campers. Not being able to swim, he unfortunately drowned, and Mrs. Voorhees was far from happy. One of the counsellors responsible for Jason's death, he was busy making out with this counsellor, Claudette. Mrs. Voorhees killed them both in 1958. She went on another killing spree in 1979, killing every single counsellor at the camp. He was beheaded by counsellor Alice Hardy. There's much more to the story of Jason Voorhees. Please let me know if you'd like to hear more. The day after being attacked with a machete, American serial killer Jason Voorhees entered a local store and killed the owners. He stole some clothes and headed for Higgins Haven, a ranch on the shore of Camp Crystal Lake. A new group of campers had made their way to the ranch, and Jason wanted even more revenge. They came across a man named Abel who warned them to go home. Ignoring the warning, they visit a convenience store where they have an altercation with a biker gang. The bikers turn up at the ranch to get revenge for having their bikes knocked over, only to run into Jason. Jason proceeded to kill two of the bikers whilst beating the third unconscious. Prankster Shelley scared Vera with a hockey mask before wandering off and being killed by Jason. Jason put the hockey mask on and killed the remaining members of the group with the exception of Chris. Chris hit Jason with a shovel before hanging him. Jason being Jason, he managed to free himself from the noose, before Chris struck him in the head again, this time with an axe. Jason collapsed to the floor as Chris escaped in a canoe. Surely that's the end of Jason. Or is it?
Grocery stores are psychologically manipulating you. They're playing all sorts of dark tricks on your mind right when you walk in, and you might not even know it. I bet you've walked in and felt like they're hiding the small grocery baskets because they're sometimes hard to find. Well, they absolutely are, because you buy more when you use a bigger basket. They don't want you using the small ones. The dewy mist that they use on vegetables rots vegetables faster. Denmark was actually the first country to implement this, and it's just so people buy more produce because they think it's fresher. Psychologically speaking, you have 23 minutes inside of a grocery store before you start making decisions that are more based on emotion than logic. And after 40 minutes inside of the grocery store, you lose almost all logic reasoning skills. And they know that, which is why they put everything you need so far away from each other inside the store. So dairy is always the farthest from the entrance, and it's going to be as far away from the eggs and bread as possible. That's why there's also candy by the register. They know when you're at the register, you're in the most psychologically vulnerable position you've been the entire time in the store, and you're more likely to grab a candy bar. Also, we're more likely to think something's fresh if it's written on a chalkboard, which is why you see them all over grocery stores. It makes it look like it's a farmer's market, like it's been shipped in locally when it's traveled hundreds of miles to get there. While we're talking about frogging, let's talk about celebrities who had stalkers fully move into their house without them knowing. And a reminder that if you're interested in these stories, this week's episode is going to terrify you. Jennifer Lopez once had a stalker break into her pool house and live there for 6 days. And if that didn't fuel your nightmares enough, here's a photo of him. He kept taking all of these weird photos inside of the pool house and posting them online, and he was writing notes and stuff about them being married. And the same sort of thing also happened to Pamela Anderson once. In 2001, she noticed that some of her clothing and some of the food in her kitchen had gone missing. And then one night when she came home with her son, she noticed that there was a woman's face in the window of her home. She ran inside and found that there was a woman there who had been there for 3 days, and the woman was wearing her iconic red Baywatch swimsuit. She was also holding this note that mentioned how much she wanted to touch Pamela Anderson. And then, of course, there's the very bizarre story of what singer George Michael went through. One night, George was home with just another friend in his house. They were sitting on the couch chatting when he thought he heard the sound of his name being called from underneath the floorboards. And it turned out that a few days prior, a woman had crawled under the floorboard and had been living there.
This news story involving a child is incredibly upsetting, so please be warned. A 5-year-old boy from Milwaukee was reported missing on the 25th of October. The boy, called Prince McCree, was living in the city's uptown neighborhood. His parents went door to door searching for their son the day he vanished. Police were told, and they issued a critically missing alert to the media that evening. Tragically, the little boy was found at 9 a.m. the next day, deceased. Upsettingly, he was discovered in a bin. This was around a mile away from his home. His parents are reportedly understandably distraught. The child's cause of death is currently pending, but police have 2 people in custody. This is a 27-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy. It's not yet clear what the relationship is of the 2 people in custody to the child, if any. Prince is described by family members and friends as the sweetest boy. They stated he loved school and learning, he loved everything superheroes, and when he was very little he loved Baby Shark. The family have set up a GoFundMe to cover funeral costs for the child. This teacher is accused of adding a student on Snapchat and sending him something shocking. You won't believe what happened next. Ricky Lynn Lachlan is a 24-year-old teacher from Missouri. Police received a tip-off about an alleged inappropriate relationship between the teacher and a student. The student was just 16 years old, and Ricky allegedly sent extremely inappropriate videos and pictures of herself to the child. It's alleged that the behaviour then escalated to another level. She is accused of inviting the child to her home while her husband was away, but the child declined. The boy in question was interviewed by police and apparently stated that the teacher had added him on Snapchat. She then allegedly sent nude photos and videos to him. The boy told police that she requested photos back and he obliged. He stated that Ricky had warned him that she could go to prison for the actions, so to delete any photos and videos he had of her. Ricky claims that it was the student that began the conversation and that she had not been aware that he was a minor. Police seized her phone and found a video on there that matched the description of the video that the child had described. Ricky has since been arrested and charged with 6 felony S crimes.
Do you remember the time when former Disney Channel star Kyle Massey was accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a minor? You may remember Kyle from shows like Cory in the House, and obviously That's So Raven. But recently, Kyle gave an interview and spoke publicly for the first time about all this, and his response is shocking. Kyle is now alleging that he is actually a victim himself, and that the mother of the victim is the one that tried to victimize him, if that makes sense. So the original charges stated that Kyle allegedly sent explicit videos to a minor between the years 2018 and 2019. These charges were filed in civil court in the year 2019 and were eventually dropped. The person was seeking $1.5 million from Kyle. But then in February of 2022, the mother contacted another sheriff's department and filed criminal charges. But this is where this gets really strange, because recently Kyle went on record and gave an interview and stated that he was actually the one that was assaulted by this mother who filed the charges on behalf of her daughter. Kyle's lawyer named Ariel actually provided receipts that showed that Kyle had met this mother in the year 2007. This would have been when Kyle was only 15 years old. According to the lawyer, the police statement that this mother provided to the sheriff's department claimed that Kyle had actually promised this mother that he wanted to move with her, he wanted to be with her. Keep in mind, this is when he was younger. And allegedly a witness in the case heard this mother remark that she wanted to become pregnant by Kyle in order to get Disney money. Now, something interesting though is that Kyle did admit that he had communications with this underage girl, the daughter of the mother, and he even claims in a vague sort of way that there was something inappropriate that was shared with the girl and that he immediately corrected the issue. But I don't know, this is just a really strange story. Let me know your thoughts on this below, because I hadn't read this part, Kyle's part of the story, and for now it's really just one person's word versus the other.
This woman sent a horrifying text message to members of her family and then vanished. What happened next left the family speechless. Tiara Lott was excited about life. It was January 2021 and she was 22 years old and about to start a new job. She lived in Buffalo, New York and was going to start working in IT after getting her GED. However, before she was about to embark on her promising new career, she vanished. Prior to going missing, Tiara had a 27-year-old boyfriend named Andre Wingham. She was spending a lot of time with him, much to the disapproval of her family and friends. They had noticed some things that really concerned them, none more so than the bruises they noticed on her face. Tiara had a final video call with a loved one on January the 29th. During the phone call, her concerned friend asked for her location so she could send an Uber to her. Disturbingly, the video chat then disconnected. Shortly after, Tiara sent a text to her loved ones that terrified them. It said, "God forbid if anything happens to me, that I love y'all and tell everybody." Tiara's family immediately reported this to police. It would be an agonizing 2-week wait until they heard any news. In the meantime, Tiara's family and friends went to a house on Gold Street where they had an idea that she may have been. Worryingly, they didn't find Tiara, but they found some of her belongings, including her ID. Tragically, on the 13th of February, police found Tiara's body. She was by railroad tracks on Wex Avenue. Her death was labelled a homicide. Andre was considered a person of interest, but he'd also vanished. That was until May 2022 when he handed himself in to authorities. He eventually accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. He was given 25 years in prison.
A killer has now been identified in the brutal slayings of siblings Karen and Gordon Alexander. They were killed over 4 decades ago, and police now believe the killer was their own father. Sadly, he'll never face a judge and jury for the murders of his children, as he passed away in 2014. He literally got away with murder. Weldon Alexander called emergency services on the morning of April 8, 1981, to say that he'd just got home to find his 13-year-old son dead on the kitchen floor, and his 14-year-old daughter in her bed barely breathing, with a butter knife sticking out of her chest. He said that he'd pulled the knife out of her chest and called an ambulance. She was rushed to hospital, but sadly she could not survive her injuries. Both Karen and Gordon had been stabbed multiple times. Detectives examined evidence, identified witnesses, and followed multiple leads, but there was no DNA testing back then, and the case soon went cold. Sadly, Karen and Gordon's mother Nancy was in hospital at the time of the murders, and tragically she took her own life just 3 years after their deaths, and Weldon simply went on with his life. There was one patrol officer who never gave up on this case. Calvin Seward, despite being retired, was given permission last year to reopen the case in Arkansas. Over the last 18 months, he's re-interviewed dozens of people and sent off forensic evidence for analysis. And finally, a killer has been revealed. Bodily fluids found on Karen's bedding were matched to that of the DNA of her father, Weldon. Sickeningly, she was raped shortly before her murder, and police now believe that her brother Gordon had heard Karen fighting off Weldon, and he'd come to try and protect his sister, and he paid with his life. Weldon had then stabbed Karen multiple times and then left for work. He'd then returned the next morning and called police saying that there'd been a break-in and his children had been stabbed. It's just a shame Weldon Alexander is no longer alive to face up to his crimes. Had he been alive now, he'd be facing life in prison for 2 counts of capital murder.
Dan Schneider, the man behind shows like iCarly and Victorious, has been accused of a number of bizarre things over the years, so let's talk about them. So if you don't know who Dan Schneider is, he's a former showrunner for Nickelodeon who had his hand in a ton of different shows. Shows like The Amanda Show, iCarly, All That, and so many others. And it was a few years ago when these allegations began to come out against Dan, so let's go back in time. First of all, we have to talk about how this guy has an obsession with feet. I mean, think about the old Nickelodeon logo. He had a hand in that logo being made. Here are just a few of his tweets from back in the day talking about children's toes. He's talking about Victoria Justice getting ketchup poured on her feet. This tweet that he made about Ariana Grande when she was a minor, calling her little and she's smiling at her co-star's feet. This one inviting a random fan online for a drive and asking them to rub his feet. Another one informing a fan to take a toe shower. And even this one where he asks for all of their fans, most of which were minors, to send in feet pics. So obviously this is all really strange, but it was Dan's on-set behavior that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So one of the things that former stars complained about was the fact that they were constantly sexualized on the show, which even just looking at this sort of stuff, you can see 100%. 2 anonymous sources even came forward and claimed that Dan Schneider fought for more revealing outfits to be worn by the underage celebrities, and that he didn't like when the kids wore more modest outfits. He was also allegedly very handsy with the underage stars of the shows. He would allegedly have them sit on his lap on set, and people have also claimed that he would text the underage stars outside of work hours. I mean, all you have to do is look for photos and videos of him on set with some of these stars, and they're all obviously very, very uncomfortable with the way he's treating them and the way that he's acting around them. It also should be stated that Dan Schneider was eventually let go from Nickelodeon after this all became a huge deal, but they let him go because he was verbally abusive and would burst out with angry outbursts all the time while on set. I mean, there have been a lot of stars that have come out and spoken about Dan Schneider, including Jeanette McCurdy. In her memoir, she refers to a person known as the Creator, which people think obviously is Dan Schneider, and she claimed that he pressured her into drinking alcohol and then giving him a massage. And this is something that Dan has basically admitted to and asked for forgiveness for. He actually asked these underage stars of the shows for massages at different times, which is just, once again, really, really strange and should never happen. So basically, Dan was using his power and his position to manipulate all these people into giving him what he wanted, and no one was really able to question it. He would verbally abuse people, ask for these weird massages, pressure people into wearing things that they didn't want to wear. And once again, there's just so much feet stuff in his shows. I mean, just go look up a compilation on YouTube about all of this. It's wild. There are also these tweets from Amanda Bynes that she tweeted a few years ago that are really strange. But I feel like there's still so much to this story that hasn't been told, and I hope we find out more about what really happened in the near future.
It's not often that I cover a case that shocks me, but this one absolutely has. You'll probably need to pick your jaw up off the floor after this. This is Stephen Pladle, and in 2017 he married his biological daughter, had a baby with her, and then in 2018 he murdered them both in a triple murder-suicide. Back in 1995, when Stephen was single and 20 years old, he started chatting to a 15-year-old girl online. A few years later, they got married and they had a baby. Alyssa and Stephen named their baby girl Denise, but it wasn't long before Stephen became extremely abusive. He'd locked Denise inside a cooler to drown out her cries, and only would let her out once she was on the verge of suffocation. Alyssa wanted to protect her baby daughter, and she believed that the only way to do that was to give her up, and she was adopted at 8 months old by Anthony and Kelly Fusco, and she was renamed Katie. Katie had a normal upbringing and enjoyed life with her adoptive parents, but in 2016, when she was 18, she decided that she wanted to find her biological parents, Alyssa and Stephen, and she made contact with them online. By then, they had 2 more daughters, and this is where the story starts to get a little bit weird. Katie decided that she wanted to move in with Stephen, Alyssa, and their 2 daughters. Soon after, things started to go downhill for Alyssa and Stephen, and according to Alyssa, Stephen started to sleep on Katie's bedroom floor. By November 2016, their marriage had completely broken down, and Alyssa moved out and filed for divorce. They split custody of their 2 younger daughters, but Katie remained living with Stephen. Eventually, Alyssa learned from her 2 younger daughters that Stephen and Katie were in a relationship. He'd asked them both to refer to her as their stepmom, not their sister, and she was pregnant with his baby. Alyssa was understandably disgusted and she called the police. They interviewed the 2 daughters, but no arrests were made. And in the summer of 2017, Stephen and Katie moved to North Carolina and they got married. They were able to legally marry because they didn't disclose that they were father and daughter. And shockingly, Stephen's mum and Katie's adoptive parents all attended the wedding. In September 2017, Katie gave birth to her father's baby and they called him Bennett. But in January 2018, they were both arrested and charged with adultery and incest. They were both released on bond but ordered not to have any contact with each other. Stephen's mother gained custody of Bennett and Katie moved back in with her adoptive parents. In April 2018, Katie called Stephen and broke up with him, and this is where the story turns really tragic. On April 11th, Stephen went to his mum's house and picked baby Bennett up, saying that he was going to take him to see Katie. He didn't. He took him straight home, suffocated him to death, and then put him in a cupboard. He then grabbed a gun and drove through the night from North Carolina to New York and waited outside Katie's house. The next morning, he watched as Katie and her adoptive father Anthony got into a car. He followed them, pulled up alongside them at a stop sign, and opened fire, killing them both. Stephen then called his mum and told her that he'd just murdered Bennett, Katie and Anthony before turning the gun on himself. An absolutely tragic end to a shocking case.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This little girl was kidnapped in 2018 and has just been found. On the 25th of October 2018, 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was on a supervised visit with her biological mum. Her mum, Esmeralda, was being investigated over abuse allegations, so Aranza was actually in foster care at the time. It was arranged that the pair would have a supervised visit at a Washington shopping centre. However, during the visit, Esmeralda requested to take Aranza to the toilets and used the opportunity to snatch the little girl in a stolen vehicle. The FBI were notified and a huge search for Aranza and even advertised a $10,000 reward. It wasn't until a year later that Esmeralda was found and arrested, but there was still no sign of the little girl. That was until last month. She was recovered by Mexican authorities in February in western Mexico. In 2021, Esmeralda was actually extradited back to Washington state and pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping and robbery. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison. This is the crazy story of where the term Stockholm Syndrome came from. In Stockholm in 1973, an escaped convict walks into a bank and holds 4 bank workers hostage. Escaped convict Jan Erik Olsson also wounds a policeman who responded to a silent alarm, and snipers quickly surround the building. The criminal made several demands, including a car and also the arrival of a fellow convict. The police actually fulfilled his wishes, apart from one. He wanted to leave and take his hostages with him. The 2 criminals and the bank worker remain locked in a vault. Inside the vault, something really weird was happening. The bank workers were forming a really bizarre bond with the captors and actually started fearing the police more than their own abductors. They even stayed loyal when they were being threatened with physical harm. One of the criminals wanted to shoot one of the bank workers in the leg to get a reaction from the police. Upon hearing this, one of the bank workers actually claimed that they thought it was so kind that they only wanted to injure them in the leg. In another bizarre twist, the hostages even offered to act as human shields to prevent their captors getting injured. When police eventually pumped tear gas into the building to force them out, the captors even begged police not to hurt their abductors. Finally, when the criminals were sent back to prison, the hostages even went to visit them. You will not believe this insane plot twist. In 2008, Carolyn Watson and Julian Butchwald were a young religious couple. They were living in Melbourne, Australia, and had been together around 2 years. Julian was driving the pair to a picnic date in the car, but he actually stopped the car suddenly, noticing an animal on the side of the road. Suddenly, something horrific happened. Carolyn's vision went completely black after being blindfolded by a terrifying masked man. All she could work out was she was being stripped off and thrown into a vehicle. The car finally stopped and she took her blindfold off, and she was really relieved to see that her boyfriend was by her side. He'd also been stripped off and the couple were completely in the middle of nowhere. The pair managed to untie themselves, but were having to just wander around aimlessly for a week, trying to find safety. Meanwhile, police were desperately searching for the couple. Family and friends were really concerned, and they knew how out of character this was for the pair to go missing. They sent out air and water search teams, but just couldn't locate the couple. As the missing pair were very religious, they'd actually vowed to be celibate until marriage, but Julian started to suggest that it might be a good idea to break this celibacy in order to keep them warm. Finally, a local farmer found the couple and alerted police. However, they quickly found that the story didn't really add up. Julian soon confessed to police that he'd actually made the whole thing up and he'd staged the kidnapping. His motive was purely to try and get his girlfriend to break their vow of celibacy. This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband Kevin wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Haley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Haley is currently awaiting trial. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.